The Bengals finally made a roster move that was 4 months in the making, and it has everyone asking the same question about it. So in this video, I'm going to give you the answer that the team itself will not admit. Hi again, Bengals fans. John Sheeran of A to Z Sports Cincinnati here, and Germaine Pratt has finally been released by the Cincinnati Bengals 4 months after he first requested a trade off of the team. Now, I don't have to explain this move to any one of you guys. This has been a long time in the making, quite frankly, a little too long in the making, but we'll get to that in a second. But Germaine Pratt has been a quality player for the majority of his 6 years in Cincinnati, spending most of those 6 years as a starter. He was the first draft pick spent on the defensive side of the ball in the Zach Taylor era back in 2019. And once he became an established starter and the rest of the defense formed around him in 2021, we saw the good parts of Pratt as a player. And he was good enough in that season, and in 2022, he made so many game-defining and game-winning plays in those 2 years that he earned a second contract worth $20 million in 2023. But what happened to Pratt, and this is definitely not exclusive to him, we see it all over the league, he got older and older and his abilities just started to decline. And this was definitely noticeable in the 2023 and 2024 seasons. We all knew this release was coming. He was just not the same player that he was when he signed that second contract back in 2023. And when the team moved on from Anarumo, even if they did hire Pratt's former linebacker coach in Al Golden, we did kind of sense that the change in guard and the change in leadership for the entire defensive side of the ball, it did mean the end of Pratt's time here in Cincinnati. But the question on everyone's mind about this release is, why did it take so long? The simplest answer is the Bengals really wanted to trade Pratt and just held on to him for the longest period of time that they felt comfortable doing so. And in defense of the Bengals here for a quick second, this is exactly what the Green Bay Packers just did with cornerback Jair Alexander. Now, Alexander is a much better player and a much more notable name, so it's fair to say that his trade market was actually more robust compared to the trade market for Germaine Pratt. But the Packers were very likely to move on from Alexander, or at the very least have him take a pay cut, which he denied. And just a day before mandatory minicamp began for the Packers, in which Alexander would have had to show up in order for him to avoid being fined, the Packers just went ahead and released him. And this was the exact same timeline that we just saw with the Bengals and Pratt. Because Pratt obviously didn't show up to voluntary workouts, he didn't show up to OTAs, he knew he wasn't going to be on the team for much longer, and the team knew it as well. So instead of keeping him around during the week of mandatory minicamp, in which again, he would have been required to show up, the Bengals just let him go, which is definitely better compared to the alternative in which they could have kept him on the roster throughout the entire offseason in case some team wanted to trade away like a 7th round pick for him. But if it hadn't happened by now in June, it probably wasn't going to happen in August. So it is better for the team to release him 3 months before the season begins as opposed to maybe 3 days before the season begins. But again, this probably should have happened weeks, if not months, prior to this. The Bengals had no issue releasing both Alex Kappa and Sheldon Rankins before free agency started, and both of those guys landed on their feet in that month. And maybe by the time that this video is posted, Pratt ended up signing with the Indianapolis Colts and reunited with Anarumo, or he signed with any other team that needs a linebacker. I don't know, but if that's not the case, he's kind of out in limbo here late in the offseason, just hoping that another team calls him. Long past free agency, when linebackers are making a lot more money than I think the Bengals were expecting on the open market, long past the NFL draft when a lot of teams found younger linebackers than him, it's just not ideal for players to get released at this point in the offseason. And for a guy like Pratt, who had such a successful career and had so many defining moments with the Bengals, you would have expected him to be treated a little bit better than this. But it was really funny when the Packers released Alexander, because I was thinking to myself, why in the world haven't the Bengals done this with Pratt? This gives them basically no excuse to keep holding on to him, and then a couple hours later, they released him. So yes, it absolutely should have happened earlier, but at least it didn't happen during this week where they could have even fined him for not showing up to minicamp. At the end of the day, the Germaine Pratt era in Cincinnati is over, and every single captain of the Bengals defense from last year is now off the team. All that's left for the Bengals to do is just figure out the contracts of both Shamar Stewart and Trey Hendrickson, and then they can officially move past every single problem that they faced this offseason. But in typical Bengals fashion, we might have to wait a little bit longer than we should.